For 1 week every year, and for 1 week only, the largest door in prehistoric Ireland opens itself to the sun. Not a door swung on a hinge, not a door any human hand touches. A solid block of stone weighing several tons, sealed across the entrance of a tomb older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, older than the wheel itself in parts of the world. And for thousands of years, almost nobody alive knew that door had a second secret way to open. Until a small team of Irish archaeologists, working without fanfare, without cameras, without any expectation of what they were about to walk into, finally got inside the chamber hidden behind it. What came out of that excavation did not just illuminate a tomb, it rewrote what we thought we knew about the minds of the people who built it 5,000 years ago, before writing, before metal tools, before almost anything we consider the foundation of civilization. The site is Newgrange, standing in the Boyne Valley, roughly 30 miles north of Dublin, part of a UNESCO World Heritage landscape known as Brú na Boine, the Palace of the Boyne. Newgrange is what archaeologists classify as a passage tomb, a massive circular mound of earth and stone, 90 meters across and over 13 meters high, ringed at its base by 97 enormous curbstones, several of them carved with spirals and geometric patterns, whose meaning has never been fully agreed upon. At its core lies a narrow stone passage, 19 meters long, leading to a cross-shaped inner chamber with a corbelled roof, a method of stone construction so precise that the ceiling has kept the chamber completely dry for 5,000 years without a single drop of water penetrating inside. Carbon dating places the construction of Newgrange at approximately 3200 BCE. To put that in perspective, that makes Newgrange older than the Great Pyramid of Giza by roughly 500 years, and older than the main stone circle phase of Stonehenge by approximately 1,000 years. It may be the oldest astronomically aligned structure on Earth, and it was built not by an empire, not by a centralized state with armies of slaves and engineers, but by Neolithic farming communities working with stone tools, antler picks, and an understanding of the sky so sophisticated that what they encoded into this monument would not be fully rediscovered by science for another 5,000 years. Newgrange was excavated and partially restored in the 1960s and early 1970s by University College Cork archaeologist Michael J. O'Kelly in one of the most significant archaeological projects in Irish history. O'Kelly's team spent over a decade carefully stripping back centuries of collapsed material, fallen stones, and the accumulated debris of millennia to reveal the original structure beneath. And it was during that painstaking process, in 1963, that something happened that nobody on the team had anticipated: the investigation of what looked like an oddly placed slab above the tomb's entrance led to the recognition of a feature that had never been documented in any passage tomb before or since. O'Kelly gave it a name that has stuck ever since: the roof box. To understand why the roof box matters, you have to understand the door it sits above. The entrance to Newgrange was sealed, in antiquity, by a massive stone slab, a true door in every functional sense, fitted to block the passage entrance completely. Despite that door being in place, the tomb's builders had engineered a way for light to still reach the chamber 19 meters inside the mound. That is the part that should stop you. They did not just align a passage toward the sunrise, which would already be an extraordinary feat of Stone Age engineering and astronomical observation. They built a second, smaller opening, positioned with exact precision above the main entrance, specifically so that even with the great door sealed and the tomb closed to the world, one narrow beam of light could still find its way to the very back of the chamber. A door within a door. A secret aperture, invisible from the ground, discovered only when a curious slab above the entrance caught an archaeologist's eye 3 centuries after the first antiquarians had already documented the site without ever noticing it was there. What the roof box does once a year is almost impossible to believe was achieved without modern instruments. For roughly 17 minutes around the winter solstice, as the sun rises low on the horizon in the dead of the Irish midwinter, its light passes directly through the slit of the roof box and travels the full 17-meter length of the passage, flooding the inner chamber with a beam of golden light. O'Kelly himself recorded the first confirmed modern observation of this event on the morning of December 21st, 1969, watching the sun's light enter not through the main doorway, but through the hidden slit above it, just as it had been designed to do 5 millennia earlier. Think about what that requires. The builders of Newgrange had to understand the precise point on the horizon where the sun rises at the winter solstice, the single shortest day of the year, when the angle of sunrise shifts to its most extreme southern position, before beginning its slow return. They had to calculate that angle with enough accuracy to align a passage running 19 meters through a solid earthen mound. They had to then engineer a second structural opening, positioned at the exact height and angle needed to catch that specific low-angle solstice light, even E, when the main door was completely sealed. And they had to do all of this without writing, without mathematics as we would recognize it, using only direct multi-generational observation of the sky, stone, antler tools, and an extraordinary collective memory passed down without a single written record to preserve it. This is where the deeper mystery of the roof box becomes more than just an engineering marvel, because the team that re-examined the structure found something else, something stranger than the alignment itself. Researchers studying historical photographs and records discovered that the lintel stone covering the roof box had been investigated multiple times by antiquarians in the centuries before O'Kelly's excavation, going back as far as the 1850s. In 1874, an investigator named Richard Burchett managed to expose the full top surface of the stone, but reported that two men working with iron crowbars were physically unable to shift it, unable to move the massive lintel even slightly to see what lay beneath. For nearly a century after that failed attempt, the roof box sat exposed in historical photographs, visible to anyone who looked closely, and yet its true function as a deliberate solar instrument went completely unrecognized. Visitors, antiquarians, and early archaeologists walked past evidence of one of the most sophisticated pieces of prehistoric astronomical engineering on the planet and saw only an unusual stone formation. It took O'Kelly's careful, modern excavation and the patience to actually be present at the tomb on the correct December morning, to finally understand what 5,000 years of observers had missed. And here is where the story takes its most unsettling turn, the part that moves this from remarkable archaeology into something that lingers with you. When researchers worked to reconstruct the original condition of the entrance, they found that the roof box aperture itself, the slit through which the solstice light travels, had not been left open to the elements. It had been deliberately shuttered, sealed by two carefully fitted blocks of pure white quartz. Someone, 5,000 years ago, made the decision to close that opening. Someone climbed to that exact point above the tomb's entrance and placed two blocks of brilliant white stone, quarried and transported from sources many miles away, into the narrow gap, blocking the one channel of light into the chamber for all but a handful of mornings each winter. That is not an accident of construction. That is ritual. That is intention. Somebody or some group decided that this beam of light was too significant, too powerful, too sacred to flow freely. It needed to be controlled, opened only at the precise astronomical moment it was built for, and sealed the rest of the year. The Irish team's renewed examination of this sequence forces an uncomfortable question that conventional models of Neolithic society struggle to answer cleanly. Who had the authority, the shared belief, and the cultural infrastructure to design, build, and then deliberately restrict access to a structure of this scale and complexity? This is not the behavior of a loose scattering of farming families. This is the behavior of an organized society with religious specialists, astronomical knowledge passed down with extraordinary precision, and a worldview sophisticated enough to build a machine, because that is functionally what the roof box is, a machine designed to do one single thing on one single morning, for reasons we can only partially reconstruct from the silence the builders left behind. The quartz itself carries its own layer of mystery. The white quartz stones used throughout Newgrange, not just in the roof box shutters, but covering significant portions of the tomb's outer face in the modern reconstruction, do not occur naturally anywhere near the Boyne Valley. The nearest known source lies in the Wicklow Mountains, over 70 kilometers to the south. That means Neolithic farmers, working without wheels, without draft animals suited to the task, without metal tools, transported tons of brilliant white stone across 70 kilometers of unforgiving Irish terrain, for a tomb that most of them would never personally see, completed in their own lifetimes. The labor investment alone tells you that whatever the builders believed was happening inside that chamber each winter solstice, they believed it mattered enough to dedicate years, possibly generations, of communal effort toward making it possible. What did they believe was happening? This is where the archaeological evidence runs out and interpretation begins, and serious researchers are careful to distinguish between what the physical evidence demonstrates and what remains speculation. The cross-shaped chamber at the heart of Newgrange contained, when first properly excavated, the cremated and partial remains of a small number of individuals, along with carved stone basins and grave goods, including bone pins and beads. This was functionally a tomb, a place for the dead. The solstice alignment, illuminating the chamber floor where these remains were placed, suggests a connection between the returning light at the year's darkest point and some belief about death, renewal, or the journey of the dead into whatever the builders understood as an afterlife. The shortest day of the year, the moment when darkness is at its most complete and the sun's return is most uncertain to a society without modern astronomy to guarantee it, is illuminated directly onto the resting place of the dead. It is not difficult to see in that alignment a powerful symbolic statement about light conquering darkness, about life persisting beyond death, about the dead being touched, however briefly, by the renewing power of the returning sun. The Irish archaeologists, who have continued to study the roof box and chamber in the decades since O'Kelly's original excavation, have approached this interpretation carefully, resisting the temptation to overstate what can be definitively known about Neolithic belief systems that left no written record. But the physical facts they have documented speak for themselves with remarkable clarity. A door that does not open to be walked through, but to let in 17 minutes of light, once a year, onto the bones of the dead. A second door, smaller and hidden, deliberately closed with imported white stone for the other 358 days of the year. An engineering achievement so precise that it would not be matched in sophistication for thousands of years, accomplished by people we have historically underestimated as primitive simply because they lacked metal and writing. What came out of that tomb, when archaeologists finally understood what they were truly looking at, was not gold, not weapons, not the kind of treasure that dominates popular imagination when we think about ancient discoveries. What came out was proof that 5,000 years ago, on a low ridge above a bend in the River Boyne, a community of farmers looked up at the winter sky, tracked the slow southward creep of the sunrise across years and probably generations of patient observation, and then built a mountain of earth and stone specifically engineered to let that light find its way, once a year, into a chamber holding their dead. They built it to last. And it has. Every December 21st, weather permitting, the same beam of light that touched that chamber floor in 3200 BCE still makes its way down the same 19 meters of passage, through the same narrow slit, onto the same stone floor, exactly as its builders intended, 5,000 years after the last of them died, not knowing whether anyone would ever understand what they had made. The door at Newgrange does not creak open on hinges. It opens in light. And for 1 week each winter, it still keeps the promise that was carved into stone before history as we know it had even begun to be written down.